to have you on. How are you weathering the current market conditions?
I'm doing all right. I'm not super exposed to the market. I just work here, but I am weathering it fine. I weather it with great interest. I mean, I like to watch the ups and downs of the market, and we talk about that a lot at Blockworks. But not sweating it personally with any over leveraged longs or shorts at the moment.
Mm. Maybe let's start with a brief intro to yourself. Have you always been a crypto native, cryptography OG, or how did you find your way into the industry?
Yeah, no, thanks very much for inviting me. First of all, I've been a listener of your podcast since we met in October, and it's become one of my favorites to go to on my walk home typically. I came into crypto officially with Blockworks a little over 4 years ago, and before that was kind of a hobby. But I had a whole career in professional chess for about 10 or 12 years. Before that, doing content, multimedia content, and sort of quasi journalism. So it wasn't, let's say, a logical step, but I started to think about how my hobby could become more of a career pivot as it was taking up more and more of my free time. And so with that in mind, I sort of took a year off and went to do a master's in law and business at a law school in Hamburg, where I was living at the time. And while there, wrote a thesis about stablecoins and CBDCs and sort of the crypto notion of decentralization. And that was sort of a little bit of a calling card in that I started interviewing with crypto companies. And one of my first was with the co-founders of Blockworks, Mike and Jason. Jason had read my thesis, and then this was before there was a news site. So before I had a clear idea about what I was going to be doing, we had this call, and then it was only about almost a year later where I actually joined the team as their first kind of crypto native editor, let's say.
How have things evolved since then? I remember that a few weeks ago, Blockworks announced that you guys were shutting down your news business. So how have you transitioned over to the research side, and what are your day-to-day processes like?
Yeah, I mean, in a funny way, not a ton has changed for me. I've gone through different phases at Blockworks. So when I first joined, it was largely working with reporters and surfacing stories and assigning them, and then editing them and publishing them even. And as the team grew, I started to do a bit more writing, and started to also spend a bit more time, in certain more niche sections, like in the Ethereum ecosystem, for example. With research, I'm now kind of back to being a full-time editor. So I'm reviewing all of the product that we publish, and also surfacing story ideas, generally keeping up with the news, trying to be really on top of everything that I can. And so I sort of curate some feeds in our Slack for different audiences. One of which is the research team that I work with day to day.
Sounds very similar to what I'm doing for one of the larger DeFi investor communities as well, whereas it's a lot of curation work. So I'd be very curious to hear, what are your processes like for filtering out the signal from the noise? Because frankly, the impression that I have in crypto, the vast majority of time, I just spend consuming podcasts, consuming media, consuming articles, and just trying to filter out what is unnecessary and what really gives people any actionable advice.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a challenge. I think I've curated my CT following reasonably well over the years. So that's still a big source, but there's a lot of noise everywhere, and you kind of have to try to figure out what's real and what's fake a lot of the time. I think that's true for all of us on the research team, and we have the big advantage of getting together and chatting about issues most days. as a team. So that's very helpful to kind of raise questions and concerns and bounce ideas off, and then sort of try to filter out all of that noise that we can to find the alpha.
How are you guys set up as a company? I know that Blockworks is doing several things. You obviously have the event side with the Digital Asset Summit, where we met last fall in London. Then you formerly had the news business. You have all the media channels. You have a podcast. You have research. I think you also have an advisory. So how are you guys set up as a team, especially on the research side? Is everybody focusing on his or her own niche of things, or are you essentially all trying to stay on top of things and contributing to like the overview of the industry in a hive mind type of fashion?
Yeah. So the research, I'd say Blockworks research as a whole started about 5 or 6 months after I joined originally, I believe. And so I've seen sort of the entire evolution. It's really become kind of a big growth engine in the last years, and has now more or less formally split into 3 different tracks, which are research, where I am most of the time, data, and advisory. And so each of those teams, is kind of doing their own things. We get together and chat, as a larger group at least once a week. But Blockworks as a whole has always been a remote first business. So we have an office in New York, and a good number of folks are in the New York area. But I would say more than half of the company is fully remote. I've always been fully remote, and so yeah, a lot of it is spent on Slack and Zoom, and keeping in touch with everybody is a challenge, as it is for remote teams. We actually just came back from a big offsite in Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago, and that was the first time I met a whole lot of people. I've got a little show and tell. If you want, I can pull up a photo here.
Sure.
Where is my share now? So
is there a lot of mutual interest in all sectors between you guys? I mean, I can mostly judge it from the outside along the podcast, where I mean, you have the 0x Research, and obviously the highly esteemed 0x Research Telegram group. You have the 1000x guys, which are a little more on the market and opportunistic trading side. You have Lightspeed and Bell Curve. So what would you say is the overlap of research topics that you guys are covering? And on the other hand, to what extent are people really trying to niche down on their own little thing?
Yeah, so that was me on a horse in Costa Rica. It was in the middle there with my hand up. Yeah, we have. I mean, the podcast was one of the original core ideas of Blockworks. The podcast we started as a podcast network. That was actually how I found out about it. But it had started kind of as an events business and podcast network, and then the news side came later after the pandemic. And then the research side came after that. So now we have the big change in the last few months, as you mentioned, has been that we've decided to exit the news business entirely and really focus on the data and software side. So everything now is going to more focus on that aspect of the business. We still have our own in-house shows now, rather than having external podcasts that was the case 4 years ago. We have all our own shows. We have a couple of newsletters, and we have these research, data, and advisory business, and still some events as well. Digital Asset Summit being one of them that we're keeping.
I hope I'll be able to make it to London again this fall. On the customer side of things, who are your paying customers, and how has that changed over the years? I would guess that back in 2021, 2022, 2023, when you guys were setting up all of these different business arms, it was much more crypto internal, VC, crypto liquid fund driven, maybe some high net worth individuals who are full-time farmers or are trying to just grow their wealth in the on-chain trenches. Whereas now I would suspect you have a few more family offices and financial institutions entering. Would you say that this trend shift also reflects in the kind of consumption of a very deep on-chain data that you guys are trying to provide? Or is it more on they are like on a high level interacting with you, they are maybe attending DAS, sending some representative from them there from a family office or for a bank, but they haven't really arrived in the on-chain content consumption yet?
Yeah, I think all of those categories are still very much our customers. The research that we publish has been typically, more for investors, but also, the builders in the space, the executives in the industry, and even the degens are all part of our customer set. So the big focus that has shifted lately is, again, since we moved to having this data first, our analytics stuff, which I'm now showing on from the homepage, is now the landing page rather than news. And then if you drill down into analytics, we have a growing cadre of dashboards, many of which are free and publicly available, and some of which are for our subscribers, that you can peruse and try to get insights into the industry. I think we're trying to focus on curating our own data and having that data be very high quality, which is still kind of hit or miss depending on where you go for your sources. So we're building out that infrastructure, and all of that is what feeds into other products. So the research, the podcasts, we're trying to create like a solid foundation of data that can then filter out into everything and broadly improve the industry by improving the data.
Which dashboards are you personally looking at the most or monitoring very frequently?
I spent a fair amount of time on the Ethereum dashboard. I used to briefly wrote this sort of Ethereum beat for the news page for a few months, and previously wrote the 0x Research newsletter with a handful of other people. Now the research team is writing that newsletter again, and we are incorporating our data every day in both our news and, of course, in all of our reports as well. I think the best thing to do is just to go and find out what is of interest to you. There are a lot of new dashboards that even I haven't delved into too deeply yet. We just, for example, launched Zcash last week, which has a whole bunch of tabs here, and a couple of other new ones I know are Akubo, the Starknet/Ethereum DEX. We've done a lot of work with Athena. So Blockworks Advisory, for example, is right now in the running to do risk work for Athena. There's an ongoing vote about that as well. And we've spent quite a lot of time trying to be able to make the best judgments in terms of our advisory work based on the best data.
Can you shed a little more light on how the advisory business works? So essentially, does it work like a Web2 or TradFi equivalent of a consultancy, or what are usually the metrics the teams are looking for, or what they need advice on?
Yeah, it varies. So lately we've been doing work on the risks associated with protocols, and have been doing some more academic work on vault and vault curation risk. In the past, we also have done advice on tokenomics and worked with DAOs, and sort of has ran the gamut of kinds of things that issues that crop up in the industry that people look to third-party consultants essentially for work on.
Do you know what the research processes look like for all of your research analysts? Like, what is the progression from looking at data, looking at Telegram trenches, maybe still crypto Twitter, or maybe that has been kind of phased out as a news source and like a raw input source until you have an actionable thesis?
Yeah. I think trying to translate information into actionable trades is the core of it. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I was speaking with one of our analysts about this, and he talks about how do you anticipate what the second order effects of some bit of news is, or some change in the trend of a data, a piece of data, for example, revenue. And so oftentimes those are actually coming also out of our newsletter. So we're when we're thinking about, well, what is the current narrative? What are we writing about in the newsletter as well? Then that leads to other questions that you then go explore in more depth, and that can become the genesis of a research report, of some weeks down the road, for example. I think it varies a bit from analyst to analyst. We do have analysts that specialize in certain niches to a certain extent, although we also have analysts who kind of cover a lot of different issues. But for example, we have someone who focuses largely on hyperliquid, and we have someone who's done our Pendle reports, our Athena reports, who does another analyst who does our regular ETH and Bitcoin monthly reviews and Solana monthly reviews. So it's a combination of regular features like these regular updates on certain ecosystems, and more specialized deep dives into a particular area like DeepIn.
Would you say that most people at Blockworks are very on-chain native degens, or is it still a lot of consumption of like theoretical white papers and just kind of monitoring the situation rather than learning by doing?
Yeah, I think it definitely, the team tends to be pretty crypto native. Some folks have come more from a TradFi background and investment analysis background, but everybody has explored on-chain, and there's certainly a learn by doing aspect, and that's certainly true for me as well. I mean, I think when I first became interested in crypto, it was really just curiosity. How does this work? What can I do with it? How might it evolve? Just following my curiosity has been kind of the core thing I've done my entire career, actually. And that seems to have worked out well for me so far.
Do you have any personal favorites in terms of chains, protocols you're currently interacting with? And maybe also touching on your chess background, are you able to integrate any of the concepts that you studied and mastered back then into your like trading behavior and on-chain behavior? I know that there are quite a few former semi-professional or professional poker players who are now one of the larger DeFi farmers. So I wonder if there are some similarities with chess players as well.
I think there are definitely similarities. I wouldn't say necessarily so much for myself, but well, okay, to the extent for myself, like you're basically translating a highly technical, slightly esoteric niche endeavor, whether it's chess or crypto, to a lay audience if you're publishing content. And there's definitely some similarity. There's also similarities in terms of the personalities of in the industry, versus the personalities in the chess world. Very interesting international mix, cross-cultural resonance, that shows up in culture, I think, as well, in both that have some similarities. And yeah, for the the traders and the poker and chess overlap, I mean, there are definitely, I've observed that as well. I think there's certainly some similarity in terms of being a player and kind of keep your nerves under control, try to objectively analyze situations that can lend itself to trading, whether you're coming from the poker side or chess side. And yeah, I haven't. I've never became a really strong player. I got to be about an expert level myself. So not so far cry from grandmaster, but I hung out with a lot of grandmasters in my chess career, and yeah, it's interesting that a lot of what you see in trading and trying to handle the market volatility is really a lot psychological. Trying to keep calm under pressure, and that's certainly something that I think traits that both poker players and chess players have.
What are the trends, both ecosystem-wise, application-wise, or you can also zoom out on the entire industry, are currently exciting you the most?
Well, we've always been big proponents of trying to establish common metrics that you can apply to different ecosystems. One of the major ones being how we track revenue. And now we're, I think, a little bit in this downturn, seeing some signs that some of the longer lasting tokens and protocols that will do well coming out of a bear market are those that are generating on-chain revenue. And yeah, so that's always something that we're watching, seeing how things change. However, I mean, we've seen stark changes in terms of, as the different narratives come and go, how that has an interplay with the revenue that chains generate. That's something we have to constantly watch. Yeah, for myself, I mean, I have always kind of been most interested in DeFi and keeping track of various yield opportunities with stablecoins, for example, that are interesting to me. And I'm still probably more so than most sympathetic to the kind of decentralization, OG crypto ethos. So I'm naturally a bit more skeptical of more centralized chains and protocols, but there are certainly arguments to be made in terms of the evolution of the industry, that there's room for for both for a wide spectrum of approaches as far as that goes.
I mean, given that you've been like very aware and very aligned with the original ethos of crypto, but through DAS, through Blockworks, I think you guys are also one of the entities that are at the forefront in interacting with like the newer players who are coming from the TradFi and institutional side. Would you say that we are on the path of betraying the values that we originally signed up for as an industry, or do you think that some kind of middle ground will be reached there?
I hope not. I think it's really about trying to demonstrate what are the values, or what will be the value to the end user of if you want to say that the point of decentralization is really to protect users against certain adverse situations, and those situations don't always manifest, but there are cases where you see where everybody learned suddenly that there was a big liability of having all of your money on FTX in 2022. Maybe less so for certain decentralized protocols, like it's a little bit harder to explain why something like liquidity being immutable is important if you're just looking for a stable coin that you can use in DeFi or that you can transact with. But I still think that there's a good amount of room for the decentralized ethos to prove itself out and gain support as the industry grows and there's more adoption.
Speaking of decentralization and scaling, we before the pod talked a bit about Vitalik's recent post about the kind of evolution and now the abundance of block space when it comes to the scaling of the ETH L1 and the prior dire necessity for L2s to scale, and now they have become somewhat unnecessary. So would be curious to hear your takes on that post, how it is going to impact the ETH L2 landscape, maybe particularly differentiating between the ones who have distribution from a centralized exchange backing them, namely Base, Inc, and Mantle, whereas you had these really crypto native ones. I mean, I think Arbitrum and Optimism and Polygon, these were the first ones. And then later you had the introduction of like the ZK focused ones with ZK EVM, etc.
Yeah. I sort of look at the post as being more about how we're defining what is Ethereum and this sort of notion of Ethereum alignment that has been constantly debated with respect to L2s. I would say more than some of my colleagues, I've embraced the notion that L2s can be part of Ethereum, but only insofar as they were actually progressing along this decentralization roadmap, like the L2 beat, stage 1, stage 2, and so on. If they, if you're an L2 and you're stage 0 and you have no real roadmap or intent to become stage 1 or stage 2, then I think it makes more sense to just say, okay, well that really is a separate L1, which is essentially what Vitalik was intimating. So it's partly about just what do we call Ethereum. But I've always thought that there's going to be multiple chains, and they're all going to do different things. I mean, part of what originally brought me to crypto was actually spending time in the Cosmos ecosystem, and I like the idea of having sovereign chains or app chains.
Also, we have a very, very similar original entry into the industry.
Yeah, so I mean, it's in a way, some of the ideas of Cosmos have been borne out in other ecosystems, and some of the ideas of hyperscaling are being borrowed now by Ethereum, perhaps in terms of putting more emphasis on scaling the L1. And whether an L2 has its own identity like Arbitrum, or is more thought of as being more directly tied to Ethereum in some way, maybe it doesn't really matter. What matters though is what it means to the user. I mean, I think you can make a case that like stage 1 rollups, are more secure, but only insofar as you have Ethereum assets that are being natively bridged there. So the idea of having L2s, and having the security of Ethereum depends a lot on where the asset issuance is taking place as well. So what we've ended up seeing as, which is quite different from the original, I think, vision of the rollup centric roadmap, is that, you have much more either issuance on L2s or some kind of cross-chain issuance standard like layer 0 bridging, whatever, which does not, doesn't allow for this kind of inheriting of the security, strictly speaking, from Ethereum. And so I think what Vitalik is saying is now, well, we can still have rollups that really are inheriting security. Maybe these rollups are going to look, a little bit different than what we have today. Maybe we need to have this, native rollup precompile to make that possible. And it's partly just, again, a sort of reframing and expressing a little bit of the frustration of how we have never really managed to have really good cross rollup interoperability yet. So other solutions like intent-based bridging have kind of filled the gap, and they seem to be working pretty well. So maybe that notion of cross-chain composability is going to go away a bit, or at least be de-emphasized. Or maybe we'll still keep that, and it'll just look in the form of some of these newer rollups that are now probably going to be on the drawing board after these discussions.
Looking at the data that you're looking at, maybe also the user behavior of yourself and the other research people at Blockworks, would you say that there's an L2 or maybe several of them that still have a differentiator, both versus others, but also compared to the ETH mainnet layer 1?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you think that any of the L2s are sufficiently differentiated from each other and also from the L1 that they have reason enough to exist and also to grow going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been somewhat partial to Arbitrum in terms of being one of the first to reach stage 1, having more or less checked all of the green boxes for those rollups, including having an exit window. So I think they've also done a very good job in trying to attract entities like Robinhood to build rollups on top of their system, and they have a real differentiation in terms of having different languages to support execution environments to bring in developers from a wider ecosystem. So yeah, I think there are plenty of L2s though that don't really have any traffic, that don't really have many users, and they're going to have a harder time to differentiate. But maybe maybe having more niche applications that are going to benefit from from their own branding anyway, and they'll be in L2, but you won't necessarily know as a user that you're on an L2 is something that we'll see.
Are there any L2s that you're using the most besides Arbitrum? What do you think of Base? I think that they have a unique advantage when it comes to distribution. They also seem to have a lot of human capital, firepower, yet they're somehow still trying to chase every little trend that is coming up since late 2021 with the AI x crypto and all of these AI agents with virtuals. I do have the optimism that one train they're jumping on will stick down the road and they will have their success, but curious to hear your take on it.
Yeah. I haven't, I mean, I've used Base, and I generally like to try everything out a little bit, just to see how it works. I haven't had a great deal of use for let's say the L2s attached to centralized exchanges, as the need for centralized exchanges has itself diminished. So, I think what we can do on chain is now grown to the point where you essentially can use exchanges as on and off ramps, and so having an L2 attached to it has less of a direct benefit. But that's not true for everybody. I mean, some people who are, especially if you're more used to Web2 apps, you might see the integration of some on-chain and centralized exchange having certain benefits that you can't get anywhere else. So I think there's going to be a place for those as well. And yeah, I mean, Base, it works pretty smoothly. It has high, and they're also doing novel things, as you said. I mean, they're kind of experimenting a lot, and I certainly can appreciate that and admire the fact that they're trying to stay ahead of go to where the puck is moving, so to speak.
Are there any developments on the more DeFi native on the application side of things that are exciting you? I know that over at 0x Research, you guys recently had Morpho, Maple, and Pendle on the pods. These, I would say, are amongst my personal favorites, probably along with Ethena and like the hyperliquid ecosystem at large. So where are you paying the most attention on right now on DeFi?
Yeah, Maple was very early to the sort of curation space. I think on that pod, Sid referred to it as a full stack curator before it was called a curator. And the growth of vaults generally has been a very interesting trend this last year. And so I'm certainly keeping an eye on that. Some of the protocols that I like are more in this area that are a bit under the radar, like Gearbox, let's say. So I am also very interested in what Yield Basis is doing now, and Boros. So those are two still relatively new experiments that could become core primitives in DeFi. Yield Basis, trying to address IL risk in LPing, and Boros dealing with trading interest rates on derivatives. Very interesting.
Do you think that vaults will be one of the defining trends for 2026 as well? I mean, personally, from what I'm seeing in DeFi, it's a very strong growth, at least when it comes to attention and just effort exerted to let the vault ecosystem grow. I'm still somewhat skeptical how fast we are able to get traditional finance and new capital onboarded into these vaults. But overall, I would say that most of DeFi is converging more to a point where it becomes the default state that there is either active or like algorithmic management of a vault, and not everybody is running their own book as like a farmer of these food themed dexes as you had in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah, I think we've seen we've seen sort of the pros and cons of vaults in terms of them sometimes having an opaque structure with the stream finance stuff, which you've talked a lot about on your podcast. In general, the idea of vaults in terms of giving broader access to more complex strategies and democratizing those, I like a lot. I mean, one of the things that I've discovered is, just when, especially like in 2021, 2022, when I was much more active on chain than I am now, just things like doing the accounting is a nightmare. Keeping track of transactions, and especially since a lot of cross-chain operations are considered exchanges when you don't think of it. Like you move one asset from one chain to another. That's considered a swap in most jurisdictions, rather than just a transfer. And those are, the more complex you get in terms of DeFi strategies, the more challenging it is to kind of sort that all out. And so the idea of being able to just drop some stable coins in an app on your phone and have it be invested in the optimal yield generating way is very appealing, and has a lot of potential adoption possibilities. The advantages are easier to communicate to others when you can say, well, here you can safely earn 5, 6, 7% or something compared to what you get in a bank. I mean, I think a lot of people like that idea.
Since you as an editor are sitting the closest to the actual audience of what you guys are producing at Blockworks, what would you say the more TradFi and fintech inclined people are looking for? How do you perceive their current understanding of the space? Is it feasible to just address them in the same language as it is possible to address the DeFi degens and like on-chain full-time participants? Or like, what do you have to cater to in order for them to come on-chain and participate in vaults, participate in DeFi, maybe perp dexes if it's more market making and trading focused?
Yeah, that's still a big challenge, I think, especially I think one of the things that I don't like about the current environment is that, especially in the US, politically, crypto is still kind of very polarizing, and its association with Trump and the Republicans is double-edged. Let's say, on the one hand, we see some positive benefits in terms of changing policy, and that might open the doors for DeFi to become more mainstream. But you still just have plenty of people who just see that crypto is associated with Trump and will have this knee-jerk reaction regardless of what the benefits might be for their situation. So in that sense, you probably want apps to develop their own brand and their own language, and have the DeFi mullet philosophy, where the crypto part is completely in the back end, and the user doesn't even have to know about it. That's probably what will happen, and I think that can work just as well. And you can still have the degen folks who know the difference between different kinds of cross-chain bridging and what the security implications are, and can set their positions accordingly.
On the note of like reaching out to the TradFi people more, do you think that crypto and especially DeFi is just going to converge with fintech? I think we've seen quite a few steps that are leading to such a convergence over the past couple of months, with the emergence of crypto credit cards, looking at EtherFi, also the integration of L2s by fintechs, for example, Robinhood, and then the whole, I think prediction markets are the niche where it is the most obvious, because that is something that people are entering not with the intention, okay, I want to participate in crypto, but I want to participate in that prediction market, and it is just using crypto and blockchain as a backend infra.
Yeah, my sense is that is the direction that things are going. I mean, prediction markets are a perfect example where, I think plenty of people are now using prediction markets in their daily life, or at least aware of them, and don't necessarily recognize that they're running on crypto rails in the background. So we probably start to see that more on DeFi applications. I mean, I think you already have that with certain apps and vaults that especially those that are focused on being mobile first. Some of them with attached cards, as you say. And it will get to the point where, you can download an app and onboard through that app, spend, earn your stablecoin yield and spend that at the grocery store and not really be the wiser that you're using crypto.
On the policy and politics side of things, do you think that crypto has failed as a politically neutral money? So is that basically irrecoverable in the US? And if so, do you think that is going to be an existential risk for the industry going forward?
It's really hard to say. I don't think it's going to be an existential risk, but I do think that we may look back some years from now and say, net, the past year of politics in the first year of Trump has been a drag. It didn't have to be this way. I mean, it's really kind of silly that we even have to, considering the achievements that we've had this year on the regulatory front and with the Genius Act, and if the market structure bill actually happens, that would be great. But even so, I mean, it was just such an own goal. I mean, really unnecessary to go so clearly into the more grifty aspects that we have always tried to minimize and sideline, in the more serious corners of the industry, and to see that then become what a huge portion of the public takes away from the past year's political work is really disappointing to me personally, and I really hope that we can recover from it. And probably that will just take time and a different kind of political effort than we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of missed chances when it comes to the reputation improvement of the industry, particularly looking at the US. So perhaps the launch of the Melania token really was the beginning of the end over there. But I mean, overall, if we look at the regulatory landscape, I mean, the things that have happened in 2025, we could not have even dreamed of back in 2021 and 2022. So I do think that if you want to build now and you still have 3 years until you might see a complete 180 change in industry, like regulatory sentiment, I mean, what's going to happen throughout the midterms might make it much more difficult down the road to ease regulation on crypto or to like get anything through Congress if there's no ability for agreement between the two parties there anymore. Which I mean, I just spent a month in Puerto Rico, so not US mainland, but still like very as a territory of US, you still have a lot of influence there from US politics, of course. And when I look at that society, it is incredibly hard to find any remaining common denominator between the two political camps there. And it's an issue that is propagated and amplified by both sides there. So I would be very positively surprised if they're able to like agree on regulation and on policy going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to recognize that crypto is global. The idea of global permissionless money, global permissionless financial markets is a powerful one, and it should be able to outlast any one political regime in any one country. In terms of the U.S. and builders, I mean, I think to a certain extent, you really want to see at least basic protections for developers. Basic rules of the road get passed into law, so that it's harder to really do a 180. If everything is just basically what any given agency feels like doing on any given day in terms of enforcement, then you could very quickly be back to square one on that front. So that's why I think trying to find some solutions to whatever is delaying the market structure bill is pretty important before the midterms, and we'll see a fair amount of gridlock after that. So then it becomes again the larger political question. I mean, I think there's plenty of things that can appeal to all sides of the ideological spectrum politically about crypto. many of the skepticism that on the political left that you have of big banks and the centralization vectors of big tech are something that crypto is very well positioned to address. So those should be values that could be embraced by the Democrats just as much as the values of freedom and individual liberty should appeal to folks on the ideological right. So it need not be a partisan issue, and it should not be a partisan issue. And the fact that it is a partisan issue is, again, profoundly disappointing to me personally.
Yeah, no, I heavily agree with that, because I mean the idea of a politically neutral money, especially what we've seen, for example, in Canada, in I think it was early 2022 when they froze the accounts of even supporters, not even participants of the protests there. I mean, that is just unprecedented for any country that wants to call itself a free democracy or considers itself part of a so-called free West, where it's very debatable what extent of that free West is still alive and thriving in these times. But I mean, I don't think there's a viable alternative to being optimistic and just try to install these permissionless and like more credibly neutral primitives so deep in our day-to-day lives and in our infrastructure that there is no path around them. Like there's no ability to abuse them, there's no ability to politicize them. But I do think that 2025 has led a lot of people to become very cynical about the industry, not only because the apparent politicization, but also just due to the general underperformance of crypto when you compare to other markets, commodities, if you compare to equities. Even though the overall macro environment in 2025, while we've been kind of creeping up and it has felt very euphorical and unsustainable at times. Overall, the macro developments have been very positive last year. So, I mean, also looking at you and your colleagues, what is still exciting you about this industry every single day to like sign in to all your Telegram groups and just continue hanging out here?
I mean, I'm never leaving, is the meme. There's too much that's interesting all the time. And even in the last month, I mean, even as it looks like we're more firmly heading into a bear market that could last for a while. I mean, there's still a lot of fascinating, technological developments coming down the pike. And so I think as long as that continues to be the case, we'll find something that works, that resonates, that that can actually gain meaningful adoption and become integrated into the system. But I think, it's not just about the efficiency gains, the productivity gains, although that could be a significant part of it, especially in the early days. But still, the basic ideas about having more control and having more direct responsibility for your financial life should be one that can resonate for for the world in the future. I think nobody likes this idea of the Cantillon effect and having people who are currently entrenched in power being able to just siphon off the resources of the world for a small portion of the elite. Crypto is fundamentally a democratic technology. It's about empowering the individual, and that is a universal value that I think many people in many different cultures have, and it's just really a question of finding the direct applications of those ideas in a way that can appeal and win in the marketplace. And that's still something that that we think is coming. That's a mega trend at Blockworks that we want to be a part of, and and I wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, I like the optimism there quite a lot. Since we're getting closer to the hour, are there any topics that we haven't touched upon that you would like to talk about? Any trends, any favorite applications, or like even any tokens that you think are super underrated or maybe also overrated?
Well, I would just like to say that I think we're still getting the word out about the new Blockworks. The new site just launched at the end of December, and so I would encourage everybody to check it out. Browse through some of the dashboards, again, many of which are free and public, and subscribe to the free 0x Research newsletter. So that's a good front door if you are interested in Blockworks research and any of the trends, including hot tokens. you can start by subscribing there, and increasingly some of our research reports are also going to be unlocked and public as well. So there'll be plenty to follow on that score if you, for whatever your interests lie.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly support that. I would say that 0x Research, Empire, Bell Curve, and 1000x are like the podcasts that I'm listening most religiously to in all of crypto. So I think you guys have done great work on the research side and on the media side as well. Really just a great collection of resources you have there. Let me know if there are any links that we should put into the podcast description. And yeah, I encourage everybody to check out the resources available.
I will share a few links for sure. Thanks so much for the invitation, Max. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot for coming on, and hopefully have you back on the show soon.
Great. Cheers.